Welcome to Strength Chat Podcast, presented by Kabuki Strength. Introducing your hosts, Chris Duffin, the mad scientist of strength, Rudy Cadlove, mature athlete and coach, and the wizard of training himself, Brandon Sen.
Welcome to Strength Chat with your host, the mad scientist of strength. Yes, that's right, myself, Chris Duffin. To my right, are you laughing at me, Rudy? You laughing?
You got that down. You're doing good.
I practiced. I just messed up you and Brandon. So
Yeah.
Are we still doing the double intro too?
Yes, we're still doing the double intro.
Okay, I
double
just wanna
intro.
make sure.
He gets his own intro down pretty well.
So, to my right, our mature athlete, and I can't call you master because now I'm officially a master's as well. But our mature athlete and coach, Dr. Rudolph. And to my left, the wizard of training, Mr. Brandon Sen. Okay. Today, well, actually, we've got some exciting stuff going today. Besides having Mr. Joe DeFranco on the podcast, we tonight are going bowling. Is that right?
Well, we'll see.
Well, oh, yeah, that's right. Brandon is not bowling. He's going to drink beer and watch because during
I thought you said you wouldn't talk about this.
Brandon's during the course of his athletic career, and I use athletic career very loosely in reference to the Wizard of Training.
Currently in athletic development
phase, and has suffered one major traumatic injury during the course
traumatic. Thank you.
How did this happen? Can you tell me about it?
No, I don't remember actually.
It's blocked.
It's blocked.
You just remember
There was some sort of torn muscle. I've torn many muscles.
Okay,
I don't enjoy it.
I tore my quad bowling. Is that what you want to hear?
That's what I wanted to hear.
Partial quad tear bowling. Could have been a grade 3. I think the only reason it happened, my body is so efficient and powerful that when I went to do a single leg like post, it exploded because there was so much force. Like there was like a 1 on the Richter scale.
Force development through the roof.
Very
Bowling.
neurologically efficient.
Yeah. I put the anti in anti-fragile.
If you'd laid that, those pins might have shattered. That's what was going on.
They did, actually.
They did shatter.
Yeah,
okay.
I'm kicked out. That's why I can't go. It's because I'm not allowed anymore.
They'll have supervision for you tonight.
You just can't. You just can't handle a 16-pound ball. You got to go down to one of those little pink ones,
Well,
a 9 or a 10-pound ball.
Rudy, it's all about velocity, man. Haven't you been listening to watching our training plans?
I'm going to be working on Brandon's movement prep tonight to get him prepared for bowling injury-free is the plan. So we will begin working on the alley.
Anne's going to come tonight and bring her own ball. Show you how to do it, Brandon.
All right.
Well, I plan on using that little ramp they have.
That'll work. All right, well, let's not keep Joe waiting much longer. Here we go.
So today we're really, really happy to have on, speaking of athletic development, Mr. Joe DeFranco of world-famous DeFranco's Gym. And Joe is like one of the hardest people to give an intro for because his accolades are like this giant list. It's not just like any one world, but, he works with athletes from development, speed, agility, mobility, endurance, and just like what he's done from a business standpoint. Like I said world-famous, that gets used loosely sometimes, but everybody knows DeFranco's Gym, and it's like had an impact. Things that Joe have done has had an impact on, the fitness industry as a whole. There was a time that, you were expected to have a big, large facility, and you couldn't make it, as a one-man guy or a small shop, in a small location, and Joe started out with a 500 square foot location, and it literally is, world famous DeFranco's Gym, like the level of athletes that have gone through there, and Joe's been in the game for 2 decades now. I was just on this podcast, which was a fabulous time. Listen to it if you get a chance on the Industrial Strength podcast. But there's so many things that he's been involved in, publications. I wasn't aware of this one, but I was just reading through about Joe. 2015, Joe was inducted into the Personal Trainer Hall of Fame. So, just the list goes on and on. So I don't think I've got to do too much because the thing about it is most people know who Joe is. So
those who know.
That's right. So, and I'm going to try to get a few questions in here early because I know Brandon's itching with some questions today for Joe, but like I said, you've been at this for a couple decades now, Joe, and you've transitioned. And like when I first started reading or watching your content, like in the early 2000s myself, much of what you're doing, as a business, as a person, the impact in the fitness community, all that's been like constantly evolving. So can you give me, or for our listeners, a timeline of, what has gone on and where you're at now, and what are your goals, and what are you after within the community now?
Sure, and thanks for having me. That intro actually turned out to be pretty good after all. I appreciate that. Feel very special right now, so try to live up to the hype at this point. But yeah, I guess I was lucky enough to know what I wanted to do early on, besides wanting to play in the NFL like a lot of other kids growing up. When that dream ended, I had a tumor in my sacrum. I developed a benign tumor that was growing inside of the sacrum, and it was misdiagnosed for years. Ended up losing a lot of my scholarship offers and kind of having to figure out what I wanted to do with my life early on. It almost turned out to be a blessing in disguise, I guess, because this happened when I was 17. So I took 4 or 5 years to get it treated, and countless surgeries, and kind of went through hell, to be quite honest, for about 5 years. But once they removed the tumor and I knew that my football career was over, I immediately got into the industry. And I was lucky enough that right about 5 minutes from my house, the Parisi Speed School had just opened. And at that time, there wasn't really a lot of like quote unquote athletic performance centers. It was still more of just health clubs and, Gold's Gym, and those type of chain type fitness centers. And Bill Parisi opened up, and his thing was speed training, and it was a lot of young kids, but it was still geared towards athletics. And so I knew right from the get-go I wanted to try to get in there. So I got an internship there. I interned for a year. I didn't get paid. We all have our kind of backstory. I was bouncing at strip clubs and doing what I had to do to kind of make ends meet during that time, because I wasn't making any money. And then even when I started making money, I was making like $8 an hour. But, I worked my ass off and, worked my way up the food chain, so to speak, and became the director of training over there, and had 5 great years there, a lot of experience, learned a lot. But then I ended up, my true passion was really strength training, even though overall developing athletes. But I always loved, the weight room was where I was most comfortable. And I grew up like a Rocky Balboa fan. I loved the old school, like warehouse gym. My dad was a state trooper, a New Jersey state trooper, but he had a private gym that was in Paterson, New Jersey, really, not the nicest section of town that you'll ever see. And they were on top of this factory, and it was a private gym. It was $10 a month, and it was basically, police, fire, and military personnel trained there. It was one of those, you could go at 3 a.m. Everybody had their own key. And that's where I learned to work out and train. And so I always kind of had a passion for that type of atmosphere, that type of facility. So, I was working at this big fancy, speed center. We had an indoor track, indoor turf field, and I loved it. I had 5 great years there. But when I went on my own, I didn't have money to open up something like that. I didn't have any investors. So my only option was to do something kind of small. And that's the story behind the storage closet. Was I knew the owner of a gym that was about 5 minutes from my house, and I used to train there over the summer when I was in college, and I knew they had this empty storage closet in the back that they just had some old broken down equipment and like office furniture. And I went into them one day. I said, listen, I just left my job that I was at for 5 years. I want to start training people. I know you have that room downstairs in the back. Can I clean that out and I'll pay you a rent for it? And he thought he was like, the storage closet? What the hell are you going to do in there? I'm like, I'm telling you, I got a vision that I think I could do something with that. So he was happy just to make money off of a vacant storage closet.
Yeah, why
he
wouldn't
could
you?
care less. Yeah, and I mean, I was paying him, like, I look back and, it was a great deal because I had no other headaches or overhead. But he charged me over $1,000 for this little, closet. So he was making an extra $1,000 a month.
Yeah.
And so it was a good deal for him. And, slowly but surely, I was training a lot of high school kids I went to a big football high school. I went to Bergen Catholic High School, and it was the same coaching staff from when I was there. So I had that connection. So I had some initial clients coming in, which was good. I needed. Started with them. They started seeing incredible results. They started telling some friends. Then I started getting, kids from other towns. Next thing you know.
Was that in Patterson where you started? Is that the?
It's Waldwick, New Jersey.
Okay.
A little bit of a nicer section of town, about 10 minutes away. So same area, northern New Jersey, and it just grew from there. And before I left the storage closet, I had 8 guys from the New York Giants, 8 starters from the New York Giants training with me, a couple high school All-Americans. One of the things I'm most proud of, because anybody could have a pro athlete walk into their facility, but in my storage closet gym, 7 high school kids that train there went on to play in the NFL. So I had
That's awesome.
7 kids that I've worked with from the time they were in high school to the time they were in the NFL. And one made it to the WWE and is a big WWE superstar now. He goes by the name Enzo Amore. So we have like 8 kind of professional athletes that came from a 500 square foot storage closet, and, which always, to me, proved to people it's not about how big the facility is. It's not about the fancy equipment. It's, what you're doing in there, the programming, the training, the atmosphere, and the type of people you're attracting. That's what creates the results. And, eventually I had to move out of there just because it got to the point where it was just way too small. And I moved into a 2,000 square foot warehouse, which had a very similar feel, which is bigger. Then I went to the 5,000 square foot facility. Then we opened up in Texas, running the gym out of the Onnit Academy, which was about 10,000 square feet. Now I'm back to the smaller 1,000 square foot private facility. It's from a size standpoint, it all has kind of come full circle. And kind of getting to your question, what you asked, what I'm doing now. Now, personally, I'm focusing more on training trainers and kind of helping strength and conditioning coaches, personal trainers, aspiring gym owners, do what I was able to do, which is really, live your passion without having to get a $1 million investment or, a couple $100,000 taking a loan out of the bank, or having investors kind of breathing down your throat all the time. There's nothing wrong with that. And big successful businesses have been built that way. But I deal with a lot of people who are just passionate about training and helping athletes, and they don't really have the best business sense, which I didn't either. And having that smaller, manageable facility enables you really to, have your own business with you're still going to have headaches because it's a business, and anybody who has their own business knows the headaches that go with it. But I've been in the 10,000 square foot facility. I've been in the 500 square foot facility. The headaches are definitely less in that smaller facility. Yeah. So, we kind of help pioneer that.
So, Joe, the attraction and you were relatively young and inexperienced at the time. And tell our listeners how you went. What was the attraction other than your magnetic personality and that rugged Italian good looks that got you to 8 starters on the New York Giants in such a short period of time? What was the attraction there?
That's a great question. I think results were number one, but I got to admit that there was a little bit more to it. And I tell this story a lot, and it's I think it's got a powerful message to it. It's about being yourself. And at that time, Parisi had a beautiful facility. Like I said, indoor turf field, track, the speed training thing. Because of our success at Parisi's, that really started to catch on. And within my 5 years there, it went from, one facility to there's probably, I don't know, 8 or 10 like quote unquote speed, agility, and quickness centers opened up. And that was like the buzzword was speed and agility and quickness training. And all those facilities kind of looked the same. They were all bigger, indoor turf field, indoor track. They're all kind of competing against each other in that sense. Like they all had that big professional sport team look to it, where I think my quote unquote gym was so different. And in the beginning, even though I loved that hardcore feel, I was almost a little bit embarrassed. Like when new people would come in to meet me, they would just hear about this guy, Joe DeFranco, and he's getting great results. And I know some high school kids that train there. They're animals. They're all state this, who's getting a scholarship. And that buzz was out there. So people would call me not really knowing. They'd schedule an appointment to meet with me and maybe sign their son or daughter up. And like I used to get the same look all the time. They would walk in because I was located in a regular health club, but I was like downstairs in the basement in the closet, in the back. So they would kind of go back there and, I'd get that same look like, this is it. Like they look around like, where's the rest of it? Where do you run? Where do you do this? Where do you do that? And in the beginning, I would almost, dance around the question. And I don't want to say I would lie, but I would like stretch the truth and say, well, we go to the park sometimes and we run. And, I was turning into the salesman that I'm just not, and that I always hated, and it's just not in me. So finally I got enough clients where I was like, screw it, like enough dancing around, beating around the bush. Like from now on, when people come in here, I'm just going to tell them straight up. And talk about like honesty and transparency. I used to tell them like the truth. I have no money. I work for somebody else for 5 years and I love what I do. I'm very passionate about what I do. I don't have a lot of money. I made just enough money to pay my bills. A, I couldn't afford a big facility. B, training is my first passion, not running a business. In order for me to focus most on the training and the individuals I'm working with, having a physically smaller facility helps me keep an eye on everyone. I don't need a staff of 20 trainers, and I get much better results in this atmosphere, which I grew up in. And this is how my dad taught me how to lift. This is how I became an all-state high school football player. And now I want to share that with my clients. So I was very upfront with that. And then I think it just became, it was so different from what everybody else was doing. It became the thing I was a little bit embarrassed about to the thing that almost got people in the door, because then about a year in, people would come, and when I would say, hey, how did you find out about me? And they would say, oh, we heard through the grapevine. We heard you train Brian Cushing. They named some football players. But then they would say, honestly, we really wanted to come and see if you were really doing all this out of a storage closet. Like they couldn't believe that the gym was actually a storage closet, and just the pure uniqueness of it actually got some people in the doors because they didn't believe it. And then once they were there and they signed up, the results are what matters more than anything. And that's where I started developing a name for myself. And then it just became like the cool place to train. It was DeFranco's, and everybody else is the same, kind of competing against each other. Then you have the hardcore storage closet where they let you listen to whatever music you want to listen to. You could sweat, you could curse, you could scream, like you could drop weights, and athletes
and grunt. You could grunt too.
Everything, no lunk alarm, no nothing. And that became what was originally somewhat of an embarrassment became the selling point, which was really cool for me. And then the really funny aspect of it was, next thing you know, maybe 3 years later, there's 10 DeFranco's like gyms within a 10-minute drive from my gym. All these people are opening up garage, warehouse gyms, training people out of their basement, saying, oh, we do what DeFranco's does, but we're cheaper. Or we do what DeFranco's does, but this. Now it became everybody trying to copy me, but being the original in that area, that just attracted more people towards me, and it actually helped business.
Nice. Well, there's a couple other important things with the size that I found. And, one of those is people think that the bigger is better, but from a business standpoint, like going with the methodology of build it and they will come, makes you actually end up, like you said, you've got loans, you've got investors, you've got all this stuff, and you end up doing things. And I've known personal friends of this that have started really larger gyms than they should have, and they ended up not enjoying it. They weren't true to themselves. They end up basically working for the bank.
Exactly.
They didn't want to be doing certain things, and they're doing that as a job just so they pay the bill. Pay the bills is not even going to them; it's going to someone else. And the other is intensity. So we started in my basement, 400 square feet.
Yeah, 7-foot ceiling. Yeah.
Went to my garage. Then we had our first 4,000 square foot location. Now we're at 9,000, and then we've actually backed off the gym size from that. Because when we expanded, like there was a huge loss in training intensity, like team dynamics, and we actually pulled the walls physically back in and pulled the equipment closer together, and it improved the training environment. And
I believe it. I lived it.
So those are like a couple things that I think, one from a business aspect, but the other just from that environment that you're training in and the impact that can have.
Yeah, it was. And the funny thing was too, I developed my name through the speed training thing, and I wasn't doing any running, but these high school combines were huge in our area, like high school kids going to these combines, and then if they ran a good 40 time or jumped high, kids were getting scholarships based on their high school combines, which was like insane, and it shouldn't be that way, but it was what it was. And what I noticed, a lot of these speed schools, and not to get on like a training tangent, but at the younger age, 7 to 13, or even kids in high school, we were doing all these drills, like these cool A skips and B skips and all this track stuff. But the majority of kids were either weak, very out of shape and just overweight, and slow because of that. So I didn't have enough room. Like, obviously it would have been better if I could have done more sprint training too, but I really focused on the root of the problem. I did it was all strength training and mobility. I used to physically do a version of PNF stretching I learned from Ann Frederick, and I was always into the mobility and the flexibility thing, always into the strength thing. So I was focusing on strength and flexibility, which is the reason why most of these kids were so slow. They were weak and immobile, and a lot of them were just overweight. I would help them a little bit with their diet. I started referring them to a nutritionist that I teamed up with, and we had a referral thing going. So I would have kids train with me for combines. We would never run a 40-yard dash, and then they'd go there and be the fastest 40-yard dash at the combine. And that's what people initially started coming to me for. The best marketing tool I ever did was make my own T-shirts. I took the little money that I had. I bought 100 T-shirts, and in the paper, when they would have the all-county and all-state football teams, or they would have a picture of the kid who ran the fastest 40 at the combine, parents started noticing those kids were always wearing this shirt that said DeFranco's on it, and they wanted to go to DeFranco's to improve their speed. And that was like the irony. They get there, and they're in a storage closet, and they go, where are you?
Where do I run?
All these faster? Where are we running? And, a lot of them didn't believe it until they saw the results. And that's how I was, beating these other places. They were just, a lot of these kids were just running wrong, and I was sitting there fixing the problem without, having them do any running, and they were getting the best results. And then it snowballed. I became like the speed guy, and that's when I went into the little bit bigger facility. Then we eventually had that little small strip of turf, and the results got even better. But again, it just goes to show you, like, the size, it doesn't really matter. Even when I was working at Parisi's, which was a 30,000 square feet mega facility, that was the joke. Like, if you train with DeFranco, you're always, like, he was always in the corner of the gym. Like, people would joke and say, you realize we have 29,000 plus extra square feet. Like, I was always by the power rack and the dumbbells, because I just knew that's what the kids needed more. And so when I had my own facility, yes, it was small, but it was I was working within the same space I was working even when I had access, to more toys and stuff.
So without any running or sprinting training, what did you attribute the increase in speed? Did you use any kind of biomechanics analysis, or would you use it video, or was it simply training the body for strength?
The biomechanics are huge, and I would go to my old high school football field. We'd go to the football field. We would go to the park and run. So if I trained a kid for a combine, we would at least run 2 or 3 times. But it's, again, you're talking over the course of 3 months. It was barely anything. So I would help them. The technical aspect of sprinting is huge, but what I was doing was just basically, we call it mass specific force, basically relative strength. I'm getting them stronger in relation to their body weight, which is the number one factor for sprinting speed. We're doing a lot of trap bar deadlifts and just getting the single leg squats, box jumps, some basic jump training, strength training, and enabling these guys to apply more force into the ground in conjunction with just giving them basic nutritional advice, because these were high school kids, skipping breakfast, McDonald's for lunch, pizza for dinner. So just getting them to drink more water and eat a little bit healthier, not even, maybe we take them from a 2 on a scale from 1 to 10 and get them eating a 5, just getting them to eat average as opposed to horrible. That in conjunction with the strength work and, again, a ton of mobility work. A lot of guys were all locked up in hip flexors, upper body too. A lot of kids that, just benched 5 times a week. So they come with me. They're all internally rotated, which will kill your speed because it shortens up your arm action, which will shorten up your stride. So it was basically mobilizing the areas that needed to be mobile, strengthening the areas that needed to be stronger, and doing that without even coaching biomechanics. You'll notice that their biomechanics will get better because they're physically now able to hold those positions. And then once they have that base level of strength and flexibility, now they'll get more out of my coaching, because I could be the best speed coach in the world, but if you can't physically maintain the positions that I'm coaching because you're too weak or you're too immobile, it doesn't matter how many hours we put into practicing it. We need to make a physical change to your body, and that's what I was able to do in 500 square feet.
So you're talking about basically assessing the situation and developing a plan to address the deficiencies that are going to lead to improving the performance. And I imagine in those early days that was a lot of just like using your coach's eye. But as you've transitioned into being the coach's coach and stuff like that, have you developed or have some sort of like assessment protocol that you use with those types of athletes?
Yes, the technology has come a long way. We spoke about it a little bit when you spoke on my podcast last week, and that has become huge. And I have Cameron Joss with me now, who was a kid that I trained in high school and experienced, my training for 2 years in high school, 4 years in college, and then he worked with me after, and now he's doing most of the training at our private facility, and he's really bringing the technology to me, and he keeps me up to date on what's out there, and we're certainly utilizing all that. But I still think with sprint mechanics, it's still everybody's body is so different. You definitely have some. I'm sure it's the same with lifting at a very high level. Like there are some basic cues, coaching cues that you'll hear a lot, but it's just different. Like I'm sure, Chris, you could watch me squat and I think I'm pretty good and I'm well educated, but you could pick out that one little thing like that you can't really write an article about, you can't put it on paper, but you could just watch me and say, turn your foot out a quarter of an inch, or, do those little intricacies. There's a lot of that in speed training just because of people have different limb lengths and, their strengths and weaknesses and body types. And the big thing is distinguishing, an actual flaw in their sprinting and just what we would call like a mannerism or like an idiosyncrasy. Like there's certain things if you try to change, you're going to screw up an athlete, especially with speed training, because the more you think when you run, the slower you're going to go. It's sprinting. Charlie Francis used to talk about sprinting being a hindbrain activity, meaning, it's the part of your brain that's responsible for all the autonomic type systems, breathing, your heart beating.
Yeah, it was fight or flight, right?
Yeah, things, I don't have to sit here and think about breathing or my equilibrium, things like that. And that's what controls sprinting. So if I'm a coach and I'm overcoaching and trying to fix every little detail, and I get that athlete thinking too much while he's sprinting, you killed him. So that's the intricacy of sprinting. It's like, is that just how his body type is? And like Michael Johnson, remember, he had that real upright posture, which was almost too upright, where you wouldn't coach it like that. But I'm not going to be the coach to tell him to do something different. How many Olympic golds did he win with that? So knowing the difference between those things is big with sprinting.
I don't think it's just sprinting, though. I mean, like for us, like most of our cues and the setup stuff that we do is all in the setup. Like I absolutely hate it. Like if I'm squatting and somebody's yelling at me, sit back or knees out or some other crap, because I'm like, you just distracted me from doing the lift. Like the lift is happening. I'm not thinking about 5,000 different things during the course of the lift. I'm just doing. And
exactly.
all my thinking happens before that. And so I think, any when you're in the zone, you're flowing, like things are happening, like you're not sitting there and thinking about all these little things that are happening at a fraction of a second.
And it's so exaggerated with the speed training because it's physically faster. We do a lot of 10-yard sprints because that's where you can make the biggest change to a 40-yard dash. And, you're talking about 1.5 seconds to remember, 10 coaching cues. It's not going to happen. It's over in the blink of an eye. And that's why I've always been so big into the, making those physical changes. And then I've always prided myself on I'm going to make the most simple, correctable changes, and I'm going to do it one at a time. I'm not going to give them 3 coaching cues. I'm going to watch them. If I spot 3 things off the top of my head that I know need correcting, I'm not even going to tell them. I'm just going to pick the one and say, okay, try that again, but do this. And let's try to perfect that one thing, and always setting them up for success. So I like doing a lot of, even our drills, I call them idiot proof, like dragging a heavy sled or pushing a heavy prowler. If you get that load right, you can't go too heavy where they can't fully extend, but you can't be too light where it's too easy. If you go heavy enough, they'll have to lean at the perfect, pretty close to a 45-degree angle. They're not going to be able to overstride. If they overstride, the weight's too heavy, and they won't be able to propel themselves forward until they get their body in the right position. So I try to choose drills and exercises that just set them up for success and train their body to go in the right positions. So then when they do it at a higher speed, it's more, they're unconsciously competent at it. They don't really have to think so much about it. And that's why you see like push-up starts, hill sprints, heavy sled dragging, resisted sled sprints. I found all of those to have a high transfer because they set their body up in the proper biomechanics without me having to say much.
Yeah, no, that's definitely an important point. I hate movements, that take a lot of coaching to perform properly. I've got a rant about the reverse hyper that I did with Brian Carroll. It can be a useful machine if it's coached properly, but why waste the time doing that when I can get the same effect, doing something that's going to put people in the right position and not have to worry so much about this intense amount of coaching to do something with a payoff point that, like I said, I can get somewhere else. Especially if dealing with an athlete, skill development should be on the field or on the court, not why, I see a lot of people, and you may disagree with me, but I see a lot of people really sticking with the Olympic lifts for some of their athletes. That's another skill development standpoint.
I was just going to bring that up.
Why
Joe,
are we
funny
going to spend so much time like developing a whole nother set of skills in the weight room instead of just like, let's work on getting them stronger and moving better in ways that are going to transfer to their sport and not teach them a new sport, basically. So
agree 100%. And the Olympic lifts, I mean, you're talking about a sport in and of itself. That even those that compete in that sport, you know, will tell you they haven't perfected it, and because that we've talked about that, you know, to death. But there's still, I guess, there's always a new crop of young coaches coming up, and that's the first question we get when these young interns or coaches come and spend a day or a week with us. They go, "How are your athletes so explosive, but you don't do any Olympic lifts? Like, what? How do they develop that?" And you know, we say, why a lot of guys
other ways
to
get explosion.
So many other ways,
and not get hurt.
Something as simple as a box jump. Like, I could coach somebody to jump on a box, and it'll take me 3 seconds, as opposed to, you know, a power clean or a power snatch. Like, I'm not going to get a training effect out of that for, you know, best case scenario, weeks or months down the road,
probably
and
months,
that's even pushing it.
Yeah, probably months.
So we'll put a pair of dumbbells in their hands and say, jump as high as you can on a jump mat, you know, work within a range, and almost zero technical skill involved, and we're getting the desired benefit with you know, a quarter of the risk and all the reward, if not more. So yeah, we haven't done an Olympic lift with any of our athletes in 20 years. Not that I'm against them. We just get a lot of guys come to us. I mean, I might get a guy that comes to me for a weekend and says, you know, I need a quick fix. I got to work out with an NFL team on Monday or Tuesday. I need to run a faster 40. Or even for the NFL Combine, you might get guys for 6 weeks if you're lucky. You know, I don't have time to be teaching Olympic lifts. I need things that are going to get me results and get a training effect right now.
Which is true with all athletes. So they're looking for a return on time invested and return on effort.
Without a doubt. Yeah, there's some cases more extreme than others, but at the end of the day, most, you know, in general, they ain't got a lot of time. I mean, the average NFL career is 3 years, and that's if you make it to the highest level. So even if you look at the big picture, I look at it as every single day of the off season counts. Even if we have 6 months, 9 months, I want to start getting something out of this training today.
Well, Joe, you've kind of always done things a little unconventional. You know, even from starting out in the little facility to, you know, even recently, there's been a lot of pushback from sled drags and different things like that. You know, but the results speak for themselves. What who have been some of the biggest influences in your training approach or even training methodology?
Well, I always strength training. When I discovered Louis Simmons, I definitely gravitated towards that. And I always say I'm not one of these guys. I never trained at Westside. I met Louis a couple times. Then I met Dave Tate and Jim Wendler and got to know those guys and learned more as much as you can about that system without actually training there, and applied some, not all. I think he's got some, you know, unfortunately in our industry, it's like politics. Everybody has me and Chris talked about this last week. It's like, you know, you're either with me or you're against me, where I've borrowed from a lot of people. West Side methodology, and Louis was definitely one of them.
Yeah, but, you put out your West Side for Skinny Bastards a long time ago.
Yeah, that was 2002, I think. And that was after a good 4 or 5 years of messing around with that stuff. And I never write something or say something publicly until it worked. Like, not only for me, but I could say I have at least, you know, a couple dozen to hundreds of athletes that I could say, here's what I've done and here's the results. And, you know, so Louis was a big influence on strength. Charlie Francis, reading a lot of his stuff, was a big influence on my speed training. But Buddy Morris was another one who kind of implemented some of Louis' stuff into a more of an athletic background and with football players. But it really, the real world experience, I talk about it all the time, but that's what gave me the confidence to kind of speak out. And I mean, as recently as a year and a half ago, I shared the stage with some, you know, high level track and field coaches and NFL strength coaches who literally gave an entire talk on how sled dragging and resisted sled sprints make you slower. And then my talk, I did an entire presentation on how I use the prowler and sleds to increase speed. And I remember sitting in the audience, and a bunch of our coaches, me and James Smitty, have our CPPS certification. So a couple of those coaches were there, and they know my philosophy on speed training and resisted sprints. And they're sitting in the audience, and they're listening to all these like highly respected coaches, put this type of training down and quoting research studies, and everybody's texting me like, dude, are you going to change what are you going to talk about? And I'm like, I'm going to talk about what I came here to talk about. Like, no disrespect to them. I respect what they do and say. And I know I'm probably not as smart as any of them, but I knew, like, for example, with resisted sled sprinting, I had my own data. I never, I didn't aspire to have any like studies published in any of these journals or anything, but I had over 20,000 fully electric timed 10-yard sprints that were performed after a heavy sled drag or a resisted sled sprint. And I was doing a talk on contrast training, and they were saying how it didn't work and all. And that was one of those things where I'm like, well, I didn't make this up, and I'm not, I don't sell sleds. I wasn't benefiting financially any way, shape or form, but I had 20,000 hours or 20,000, real world examples of what I found. And that's why, I was so confident speaking about it. And it's funny now because just recently over the past couple months, I don't know how much you guys follow, the world of speed training, but now there is legitimate research backing the heavy sled sprinting and the old rule of only running with 10% of your body weight. Otherwise it becomes too slow and detrimental to speed. They're now finding up to like 80% plus of your body weight is very, very effective for improving acceleration and speed training. So, I'm certainly not that guy to sit there and think I know it all, but in that one particular example, I'll say I told you so for 20 years because I just had a lot of experience, and I knew those other coaches that were talking against it didn't implement it in their training. I think they read another coach that they respected, and they probably just heard it from their coach's coach, and it was one of those things that got passed down as fact. And now once people really started implementing it, now the new craze is heavy resisted sled sprints for improving sprinting speed, even with advanced athletes. And I've been saying that for 20 years, but it's experience. I would experiment. I would see trends, what worked, what didn't. Things that worked, I continued to do and experiment with. And that's how I came to those conclusions. Not that I'm the smartest guy in the world. I just had a lot of experience training athletes in that one particular using that one particular method.
And data too, like that's something. So we had a chance to spend a bit of time talking with Cameron, and he was talking about some of the inner workings over there at your facility. So we've got a little bit of background on stuff, but knowing actually where your athletes are all the time on a bunch of different metrics and capturing and recording that, and I think that's we're big into data management, but I was kind of maybe lead Brandon into some questions there. But
we had a good chat with Cameron at the CSCCA this past weekend?
That was a couple weeks
ago. Yep. Yeah, talking about what you guys were doing with velocity-based training, and his big thing. That was the first chance that I think you had to meet him, myself as well. Yep. But he was very on board with measuring things, so measuring outcomes and letting that drive future training programs, training methods. And that was something that he felt really was lacking within. There's like strength. Our side of things, which is like purely just strength training, powerlifting, and then you have like your side, which is like athletic development, speed training. And he felt like that was really lacking in the speed side of things, where people would just look at an athlete and be like, "Oh yeah, you look like you're moving faster this week than last week," and it's just kind of crazy, So measuring things is huge, especially for us in our training business. A little bit different than yours is nearly 100% online. So if we can't measure something and show appreciable changes through actual data, then why would someone stay with you unless they're just like a fan, you know. So.
And that's what's been the coolest thing for me with Cameron is having someone who was a student. And like I said, he started with me when he was 16 and he's been through the program. So, you know, he knew it worked too. So he would always kind of defend me, so to speak. But once he got into the industry and really, you know, studied exercise science in college and then really got more into the research end of things, I always knew it worked because I was getting with the speed. We didn't have a ton of technology, but I always used fully electric timed sprints when it mattered. You know, we would do some handheld stuff, but if it really mattered, we would fully electrically time things. So I had a real, you know, measurable results with no human error. But because we didn't have any, you know, double-blind, placebo-controlled studies that were published in this journal or that journal, nobody wanted to hear that I had 20,000, you know, clients that I recorded that we were seeing these same results with. And what Cameron did was, now with all the technology, he's keeping up to date on that. And now it's cool for me because he's able to prove all the things we kind of knew, but I didn't have any more, you know, measurable data to, you know, prove to the scientists of the world that just thought I was, you know, a big dumb meathead that wanted to, you know, have guys run with heavy sleds because it looked cool. He's coming along and saying, you know, we have that 1080 sprint machine, which literally measures every single step. So he could tell, you know, how much force you're applying into the ground on your first step compared to your second step, compared to your seventh step, when your velocity drops down, when you're maintaining, when you're still accelerating, like every single piece of information that you would want to know for a sprint and every single step of that sprint, we now have data on. So now we're able to back with these real measurable results all the things we've been saying that we just kind of, you know, through observation and experience, I always kind of knew, but now it's getting the attention of the so-called, you know, the smart people, the researchers and the PhDs and those types that always want to study to go along with what you're doing. Now, you know, we have that because of the new technology that's available.
Oh yeah, technology is, you know, it's great, but it's only great to the extent that you can manage what's coming out of it.
Yes.
You know, I think a lot of coaches, especially within our realm, get latched on to like the new thing, and they're like, look at all the things that this thing can do. It can measure everything, you know, but at the end of the day, it's like, okay, well, you can measure that, but what are we really doing with that information? What information are we gathering from that, and then what actions does that actually drive? You know, we're really big into velocity-based training. The huge majority of our clientele use velocity measuring devices, but we're not measuring all of these outlandish metrics with, you know, bar velocity. We just want to know like one or two things and then drive decisions off of those. So there's something to be said with velocity or technology, but only as far as you can really manage it. You know, because at some point it's going to just become this giant monster that you just have cool charts to show, but never making it actually
paralysis by analysis.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
some bar path graphs and, you know, all sorts of stuff. Yeah.
And that's why we always say, like, the answer usually lies somewhere in the middle. Like in your example, I do think you have both ends of the spectrum. You know, the true meathead who's just like, oh, I just lift weights and I know I'm getting stronger. Like, I don't care what any of the research says. And then you have the scientist who has every single metric known to mankind, but have them walk into your gym and say, okay, get me stronger, get me faster. They don't know what the hell to do. And we're trying to be that in between, kind of bridge the gap between, you know, the scientist and the meathead or the athlete. And even with all the things we can measure, you know, in the example with the speed training and that 1080 unit that we have, it kind of comes down to force and velocity for us as well. And, you know, Cameron's doing a lot more with that, the force velocity profiling, where he's just simpled it down to what athletes are more force dominant, which are more velocity dominant. And then we can just manipulate their days. You know, we still have our athletes training in groups, but an athlete that needs more force might jump onto a lower box with a heavy weighted vest on. The athlete that needs more velocity might step off of a box and do a depth jump onto a box. And so it's like just those little changes and just making the training a little more specific for athlete A compared to athlete B that's why I think we're getting such great results in the real world. It's like that nice mix of, we have a lot of data, we have a lot of technology, but we're not like you said, getting paralyzed by overanalyzing everything. We're taking the one or two key things, using that, and then helping it make our training just a little bit better, a little bit more specific. And so far over the past couple months, like, our results have been, I mean, I'm proud to say we've always gotten great results, but now it's just gone to the next level by having a little more information and knowing how to use it.
Yeah, no doubt. We got to pick Cam's brain for a solid hour or so after the convention, and a lot of the things that you guys are doing really match up with what we're doing, so that was
Yes.
really cool to see across. We got about 10 minutes left, and there's a couple of topics that I wanted to get into. So you've trained a lot of special populations, a lot of really high profile clients, from Triple H and a handful of other WWE wrestlers, Brian Cushing, professional football players, and other athletes in professional disciplines. I talked to Cam a little bit about his experience with The Undertaker, and he had a couple really cool stories about training with him. What's your one or two best stories from training with either Triple H or one of your other WWE clients?
I guess one of the best stories, I guess, I might. A better one might pop into my head when we're all done. But I guess just the cool thing for me, and this is a little bit different than most pro athletes are really high profile. I hate to say it, but the higher the profile, usually the less compliance there is. I always found it fascinating. Like, why are you even hiring a trainer if you already think you know it all, and you're just looking to tell me what you want me to do with you? You could do that, on your own. So, the best story I guess I have with Triple H is just the fact that how surprised I was when I got to his house for the first time, and he was just totally receptive to anything I wanted to do. And, he said, listen, I'm very experienced in the weight room, but at this point, he was 41 years old at the time when we first started. He's like, I just had my second shoulder surgery. I've ruptured both quad tendons, tore both quads off the bone, ankle surgeries. Like, I've torn my body apart. It's on you. You do. I'm not going to say anything.
Now you deal with this.
Get me better. Deal with it. So, it was one of those things where I was happy because I was almost ready for, this big jacked guy answers the door. I thought it was going to be more like, hey, I heard about you. I respect what you do, but here's what I want you to do. So I was taken back a little bit, but happy. But then I remember driving home and I was just like, oh shit, like, man, the pressure's on. I can't blame, if this doesn't go right, I can't say like, well, I kind of took your advice on some things. Like, he put it all on me and said, get me better. I can't tie my shoes in the morning. It hurts to walk down the stairs. I can't play with my kids. He hadn't been wrestling at that time, and he was getting close to retirement anyway, but he wasn't sure if he was going to, be able to wrestle at WrestleMania anymore. And, it was all on me. So in the end, I loved it because it was pressure, and it really, it tested me, and it kept me on my feet thinking. But I just remember that drive home, I was like, oh shit, this is it. This could make me or break me. Like, this could be the best client I ever had, or I'm going to flop and it's going to be the worst experience of my life. Time to, put up or shut up. So, the rest is history, as they say. But that first little meeting was definitely stressful. And even a lot of the things I incorporated with him were so drastically different because I made that choice in my head. I was like, he's trained like a bodybuilder his whole life. He's banged up because of it. He's beat up. I can't just do the same thing. So, like, one of the things, we never touched a weight for any of his upper back training or shoulder training. We didn't touch a weight for 3 months. I did all like ISO hold, YWTs, black burns, mini band pull aparts, real strict pull aparts, face pulls, a lot of isometric holds and body weight stuff. And, I thought he would, almost get pissed or not buy in. And it took a little while, but after the first couple weeks, he got measured for a suit because he pretty much runs the WWE now. He's on the business side of things also, so he wears a suit to work every day. He got measured for a suit, and he was like a little kid, all excited. He texted me and was like, all my suit measurements were the same, except my back got wider and thicker. And he's like, we haven't even touched the weight, so he was all thinking, oh, Joe's got to do all this, quote unquote rehab type stuff with me to get me better. So he was kind of prepared to have his look, take a back seat as he got healthy. But he actually, because he neglected, those smaller muscles for so long, he actually put on muscle and looked phenomenal as he was getting healthier and he was able to move better. And then we started squatting and deadlifting again and benching. And that was, it's maybe not the funniest or best story, but just for me, it stands out because it's like one of those key moments in my career that, I had an hour and a half drive home and I was just like, oh shit, pressure's
right
on. Time to earn your keep. And so I'm proud of it. But it was one of those, if you were there, it was kind of funny because I was like, oh, shit, this is no joke.
That's awesome. We got like 2 minutes left, and the last one I want to hit you with. We're probably going to have Cam on in the next month or so, depending on when we can get him booked. What's one question you would ask him if you were us?
Oh, man. Well, ask him. You could ask him where he worked to pay for his training. When he was first training with me, he needed to go his mom, he's raised by a single parent and she refused to pay for the training. She couldn't pay for the training. So she made him pay for it. So it's a funny story of where he was working at the time to pay for his training. And now he's like becoming this highly sought after, world renowned strength coach, where not too long ago, he had very, very humble beginnings.
Okay. Don't tell us. We'll ask you.
I'll keep it at that. And you could always. It's funny. Just last thing, you could ask him. We've come. We're now like the sled sprint guys and the speed training guys, but he was one of my early experiments while I was trying to figure out what worked and what didn't. So I'm sure he's going to have some good prowler stories for you from when he was in high school, when I would just have guys, drag that until you puke, when that was the philosophy. He's probably got some good stories from back then.
Yeah, we're going to hit him with that and hopefully some other good ones.
I'll think of some other ones. I'll shoot Chris an email.
Give us some dirt on him.
Yeah, I will.
Well, Joe, that's been an excellent talk. I think our listeners are going to get a lot out of that. You're really present all over the place, but for anyone who's not in the know, where can some of our listeners reach you at? Social media, website, if they want to get in touch with you.
On social media, I'm at DeFranco's Gym on Instagram and Twitter. Those are where I'm the most active, mostly Instagram at DeFranco's Gym. And then my website is DeFranco'sTraining.com, or actually DeFranco'sGym.com takes you there as well. And my podcast, The Industrial Strength Show, every Thursday I post new shows, and you could find that right on my website. Everything's on the website. There's a podcast section, so that'll kind of take you to the podcast, take you to our CPPS certification. We have an online course now, in-person course, and anything else you need to know about us, you could pretty much find on the website.
I hear that last week's podcast was your favoriteest guest ever. So, just best guest ever. I'm just saying. I don't know who it was. I don't know who it was.
I get the official numbers tomorrow morning. I'll let you know. Most downloaded podcast ever.
Probably not that.
No, it was. I am in all seriousness, though. I've gotten a lot of positive feedback, especially people find using how you talked about using velocity as a way to auto-regulate your training. That has been, I can't tell you how many emails and just social media mentions I've gotten from people that really piqued their interest. So you guys are doing some awesome stuff over there. We're even incorporating it more on our end after speaking with you. So you love what you guys are doing.
Yeah.
Well, if you have any further questions on that, don't hesitate to shoot out to us.
I
Brandon
will.
is our go-to guy, so I'm sure Cam and him will stay connected.
Yeah, definitely.
Joe, thanks for joining us today. We appreciate it.
Yeah,
Thanks,
thank
guys.
you so much, Joe.
Yep.
Thanks for having me. Thanks, Chris.
Bye-bye.
Later, guys.
Yep. Have a good rest of the day, Joe.
Take it easy, you too.
Thank
Take it easy,
you.
guys.